I swapped my cheating son-in-law's lube for glue, and the firefighters had to pull them apart. I never thought I'd be the reason firefighters had to use the jaws of life on my own family, but sometimes life gives you opportunities you never saw coming. And let me tell you, when you discover your son-in-law is cheating on your daughter, you don't just sit back and let it happen. No, ma'am, you take matters into your own hands. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about what I did. It's about what we all learn when family loyalty is tested, when betrayal cuts deep, and when a grandmother's love demands justice. My name is Margaret. At 67, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. I'd raised 3 children, buried my husband of 45 years, and now I was living my golden years watching my grandchildren grow. My daughter Sarah had married Marcus 5 years ago. I'll admit, I wasn't sure about him at first, but he seemed to make her happy. And that's all a mother really wants for her child. Every Sunday, our family gathered at my house for dinner. Sarah would bring the kids. Marcus would help me with the heavy lifting, and we'd all sit around my dining room table, sharing stories and laughter. It was the kind of family moment you see in movies. Warm, loving, perfect. But perfect things have a way of shattering when you least expect it. It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything changed. Sarah had asked me to watch the kids while she went to a doctor's appointment. Marcus was supposed to be at work, but when I arrived at their house, I found Marcus's car in the driveway and the front door unlocked. Marcus. I called out, thinking maybe he'd forgotten something and come back home. Are you here? No answer. But I could hear voices upstairs. Marcus's voice, and a woman's voice that definitely wasn't Sarah's. My heart started pounding. I'm not the kind of person who snoops, but when you hear your son-in-law's voice mixed with another woman's laughter, you don't just walk away. You investigate. I crept up the stairs, my old knees creaking with every step. The voices were coming from the master bedroom, and as I got closer, I could hear everything clearly. Baby, you know I love you, Marcus was saying. But Sarah just doesn't understand me like you do. Then why don't you leave her? The woman asked. We could be together all the time. I will. I promise.
Just give me a little more time.
I need to figure out how to do this without hurting the kids. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My sweet Sarah, who had given this man everything, her love, her trust, her children, and he was planning to leave her for some other woman. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated. I couldn't breathe. I should have walked away then. I should have called Sarah and told her what I'd heard. But something inside me snapped. I wasn't just going to expose this man. I was going to make him pay for what he'd done to my family. I waited until I heard them leave. Then I let myself into the house. I knew where Marcus kept his things. And I knew exactly what I was looking for. In the nightstand drawer, right where I expected it to be, was a bottle of personal lubricant. The kind that's supposed to make intimate moments more comfortable, more enjoyable. But Marcus was about to learn that not all lubricants are created equal. As I held that bottle in my hands, I thought about Sarah, how she'd cried when Marcus proposed, how she glowed on their wedding day, how she'd trusted him with her heart and her future. I thought about my grandchildren, who loved their daddy, and had no idea what kind of man he really was. And I thought about justice, not the kind that comes from a courtroom, but the kind that comes from a grandmother's love, the kind that teaches a lesson so powerful, so unforgettable, that it changes everything. I was going to swap that lube for something else, something that would teach Marcus a lesson he'd never forget. I sat there in their bedroom, holding that bottle, and I realized that my world had just been turned upside down. Marcus wasn't the loving husband I'd thought he was. He wasn't the devoted father I'd believed him to be.
He was a cheat.
A liar. Someone who was planning to destroy my daughter's life for his own selfish desires. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't going to let Marcus get away with what he'd done. I was going to make sure he faced the consequences of his actions. Consequences he would never forget. The more I thought about what I'd heard, the angrier I became. How dare Marcus betray my daughter like this? How dare he plan to leave her for another woman? How dare he risk everything we'd built as a family for his own selfish desires? I thought about all the times Marcus had sat at my dinner table, eating my food, laughing with my family, pretending to be the perfect son-in-law. All the times he'd hugged me, called me mom, made me feel like he was part of our family, and all the while, he'd been planning to destroy everything. But I wasn't just angry. I was protective. Sarah was my daughter, my baby girl, and I wasn't going to let anyone hurt her. Not Marcus. Not anyone. I was going to protect her even if she didn't know she needed protecting. I was going to make sure Marcus learned a lesson he'd never forget. That betraying my family came with consequences. I was going to make sure he never forgot what it felt like to cross a grandmother who loved her family. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to replace that lube with glue. I know what you're thinking. That's crazy. That's dangerous. That's not the right way to handle this. And maybe you're right. Maybe I should have just told Sarah what I discovered and let her handle it herself. But I wasn't thinking rationally. I was thinking like a mother whose child had been hurt, like a grandmother whose family had been betrayed. I was thinking like someone who was willing to do whatever it took to protect the people I loved. And in that moment, swapping Marcus's lube for glue seemed like the perfect solution. I wasn't going to let Marcus get away with what he'd done. I wasn't going to let him destroy my daughter's life without facing the consequences. I was going to make sure he learned a lesson he would never forget. I was going to teach him that betraying my family came with a price, that a grandmother's love was not to be trifled with. Before I tell you what I did next, I need to know, have you ever discovered something about family that changed everything? Something that made you question everything you thought you knew about someone you loved? Drop a comment below and let me know. Because what happens next will show you that sometimes the best justice comes from the most unexpected places. I spent the next 3 days researching my options. I'm not a vindictive person by nature, but when someone hurts your family, you don't just sit back and take it. You fight back. And I was going to fight back in a way Marcus would never see coming. The first thing I did was research different types of adhesives. I needed something that would look like personal lubricant, but would have very different properties. Something that would create a situation so embarrassing, so unforgettable, that Marcus would think twice before ever cheating again. I considered super glue, but that was too dangerous. I didn't want to cause permanent damage, just a lesson. Then I thought about industrial strength adhesive, but that seemed too extreme. I needed something that would be humiliating, but not harmful. Finally, I found it. A special type of industrial adhesive that looked exactly like personal lubricant, but had the consistency of thick honey. It's used in construction and manufacturing, designed to create a strong bond between surfaces. Perfect for my purposes. I drove to the industrial supply store on the other side of town, wearing my most unassuming outfit, a simple blue dress and my reading glasses. I didn't want anyone to recognize me or remember my visit. The store was huge, aisles of tools and equipment I'd never even seen before. I found the adhesive section and spent 20 minutes reading labels. Finally, I found it. A clear, viscous adhesive that came in a bottle almost identical to the one Marcus had in his nightstand. "Can I help you with something?" a young man asked, walking over with a friendly smile. "Oh, I'm just looking for some adhesive for a home project," I said, trying to sound casual. "My grandson is working on a school project, and he needs something that will hold really well." "What kind of project?" he asked. "A model bridge," I said quickly. "He's studying engineering, and he needs something that'll hold the pieces together really securely." The young man nodded and showed me a few options. I picked the one that looked most like what I needed. I paid in cash and left as quickly as I could. Back at home, I carefully examined my purchase. The adhesive was clear and thick, just like I'd hoped. I tested it on a piece of paper, and it created a strong bond that was nearly impossible to break. Perfect. Now I needed to transfer it to a bottle that looked exactly like Marcus's. I went to the drugstore and bought the same brand and type of lubricant I'd seen in his nightstand. I carefully emptied the contents and replaced them with my special adhesive. The bottle looked identical. Same size, same shape, same label. The only difference was the contents. And Marcus would never know until it was too late. As I prepared my plan, I had moments of doubt. Was I being too harsh? Was I taking things too far? Marcus was still the father of my grandchildren, and I didn't want to do anything that would hurt them. But then I thought about Sarah, about how she'd trusted Marcus with her heart, her future, her children, about how she'd built a life with him, only for him to plan to throw it all away for another woman. And I thought about my grandchildren, who deserved a father who would be faithful to their mother. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about teaching Marcus that actions have consequences, that betrayal doesn't go unpunished, that family loyalty still means something. I waited until I knew Marcus would be home alone. Sarah was taking the kids to visit her sister for the weekend. Marcus had told her he was going to work late.
Perfect.
I let myself into their house using the spare key Sarah had given me. I went straight to the master bedroom, to the nightstand where I'd seen the original bottle. I carefully removed the real lubricant and replaced it with my special adhesive. The bottle looked exactly the same. Same position. Same everything. Marcus would never suspect a thing. Now came the hard part, waiting. I had to trust that Marcus would use the bottle, that he would discover the consequences of his actions, that my plan would work exactly as I intended. I went home and tried to act normal. I called Sarah to make sure she and the kids were doing well. I did my usual Saturday morning routine, coffee, newspaper, crossword puzzle. But inside, I was a bundle of nerves. What if Marcus didn't use the bottle? What if he discovered the switch before anything happened? What if my plan backfired and made things worse for Sarah? But I had to trust the process. I had to believe that justice would be served, that Marcus would learn his lesson, that my family would be protected. As the hours passed, I found myself checking my phone constantly, waiting for news. I knew that if my plan worked, there would be consequences. There would be embarrassment, confusion, maybe even emergency services involved. But I also knew Marcus deserved whatever happened to him. He had made his choice when he decided to cheat on Sarah, when he planned to leave her for another woman. Now he would face the consequences of that choice. I just hoped that when the dust settled, Sarah would understand why I'd done what I'd done, that she'd see I was protecting her, protecting our family, protecting everything we'd built together. But as the hours turned into days, I began to question myself. Was I really doing the right thing? Was I protecting Sarah? Or was I just being vindictive? Was I teaching Marcus a lesson? Or was I only making things worse? I thought about calling Sarah and telling her what I discovered. I thought about confronting Marcus directly. I thought about letting things play out naturally, without my interference. But every time I picked up the phone, I put it back down. I couldn't just let Marcus get away with what he'd done. I couldn't just stand by and watch him destroy my daughter's life. I had to do something. I kept reminding myself why I was doing this. Marcus had betrayed my daughter. He'd planned to leave her for another woman. He'd risked everything we'd built as a family for his own selfish desires. He deserved to face the consequences. He deserved to learn a lesson he'd never forget. He deserved to understand that betraying my family came with a price. And if that price was embarrassment, humiliation, then so be it. He'd brought it on himself. I knew that rushing things would only make them worse. I had to wait for the right moment, for Marcus to use the bottle, for my plan to unfold naturally. So I waited, and I watched, and I hoped that my plan would work exactly as I intended. I prepared myself for what might happen next. I knew that if my plan worked, there would be questions. There would be explanations. There would be consequences to face. I prepared my story, my justification, my explanation for why I'd done what I'd done. I prepared myself to face Sarah's anger, Marcus's humiliation, the family's confusion. But I also prepared myself to stand by my decision. I'd done what I thought was right to protect my family. I wasn't going to apologize for that. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day that passed without news made me more anxious, more uncertain. Had my plan worked? Had Marcus used the bottle? Had he learned his lesson? The anxiety was overwhelming. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't concentrate on anything. All I could think about was my plan. What might have happened. What the consequences might be. What if Marcus had been seriously injured? What if the other woman had been hurt? What if my plan had gone too far and caused real damage? But I also thought about what might happen if my plan didn't work. What if Marcus never used the bottle? What if he discovered the switch before anything happened? What if he got away with his betrayal without facing any consequences at all? Despite my anxiety, I held on to hope. I hoped that my plan would work exactly as I intended. That Marcus would learn his lesson. That Sarah would be protected. That our family would be safe. I hoped that justice would be served. That betrayal would be punished. That love would triumph over deception. I had faith. Faith that I'd done the right thing. Faith that my plan would work. Faith that Marcus would learn his lesson. That Sarah would be protected. That our family would be stronger for what we'd been through. I had faith. That love would conquer all. That truth would prevail. That justice would be served. And finally, after 3 long days of waiting, my phone rang. It was 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. And I knew immediately that my plan had worked. The call was from the fire department. They needed me to come to Sarah's house immediately. This was it. The moment of truth. The consequences of my actions were about to unfold, and I had to face them head on. It was 8:47 p.m. when my phone rang. I'd been sitting in my living room, pretending to watch television, but really just waiting for the call that would tell me my plan had worked. "Hello," I answered, trying to sound casual. "Mrs. Margaret?" It was a man's voice, but not Marcus's. "This is Captain Rodriguez from the fire department. We're responding to an emergency at your daughter's house, and we need you to come down here immediately." My heart started pounding. This was it. My plan had worked, but now emergency services were involved. I'd never intended for things to go this far, but I couldn't back out now. "I'll be right there," I said, hanging up the phone and grabbing my keys. The drive to Sarah's house took 15 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. I kept thinking about what I'd done, about the consequences of my actions, about whether I'd made the right choice. What if someone was hurt? What if the situation was more serious than I'd anticipated? What if my plan had gone too far and caused real damage? But I also thought about Marcus, about what he'd done to Sarah, about the betrayal that had started this whole chain of events. He'd made his choice, and now he was facing the consequences. When I arrived at Sarah's house, there were 2 fire trucks and an ambulance in the driveway. The front door was open, and I could see firefighters moving around inside. This was more serious than I'd expected. I parked my car and walked up to the house, my heart pounding with every step. A firefighter met me at the door. "Mrs. Margaret?" he asked. The bottle in the nightstand contains industrial adhesive, not lubricant. Do you have any idea how that got there?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. I could lie. I could pretend I didn't know anything. I could let Marcus take the blame. But that wouldn't be right. I'd made my choice, and now I had to face the consequences. "Yes," I said, looking directly at Marcus. "I know exactly how it got there. I put it there." The room went silent. Marcus's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. The woman stopped crying and stared at me. Even the firefighters froze in surprise. You what?" Marcus stammered. "I replaced your lubricant with industrial adhesive," I said calmly. "I did it because I know you're cheating on my daughter, and I wanted to teach you a lesson." Marcus's face went from red to white. "Mrs. Margaret, I don't know what you're talking about. I would never cheat on Sarah." "Don't lie to me, Marcus," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I heard you with this woman on Tuesday. I heard you planning to leave Sarah for her. I heard you saying Sarah doesn't understand you like she does." The other woman started crying again. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. The firefighters exchanged glances, clearly caught up in the drama unfolding before them. "I know everything, Marcus," I continued. I know you've been having an affair. I know you've been planning to leave Sarah. I know you've been lying to my daughter, to my grandchildren, to this whole family." Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The firefighter cleared his throat. "Mrs. Margaret, while I understand your motivation, what you did was potentially dangerous. Industrial adhesive can cause serious injury if not handled properly. We're going to need to file a report about this incident." "I understand," I said. "I take full responsibility for my actions. But I also want to make it clear, Marcus was engaged in an affair. I was trying to protect my family. The firefighters finished their work and left, but the damage was done. Marcus's secret was out, his affair exposed, and he was facing the consequences of his actions in the most humiliating way possible." The other woman left without a word, clearly never wanting to see Marcus again. Marcus sat on the couch, still wrapped in his towel, looking like his world had completely collapsed. As I stood there, staring at the man who had betrayed my daughter, I felt a storm of emotions. I was satisfied that justice had been served, but I was also sad that it had come to this. I'd never wanted to hurt anyone, but I couldn't let Marcus get away with what he'd done. "Marcus," I said quietly, "I did this because I love my daughter and my grandchildren. I did this because you were planning to destroy our family, and I couldn't let that happen." Marcus looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. It was understanding. He finally understood what he had done, what he had risked, what he had almost lost. Marcus sat there, wrapped in his towel, looking like a broken man. The humiliation was complete. Not only had his affair been exposed, but it had been exposed in the most embarrassing way possible. The firefighters had to use special tools to separate him from his mistress. And now everyone knew what had happened. "I can't believe this," he whispered. "I can't believe this is how it ends." "This isn't how it ends, Marcus," I said. "This is how it begins. This is where you decide what kind of man you're going to be, what kind of husband, what kind of father." Marcus looked at me, and I could see the weight of his choices crushing him. "I never meant for this to happen," he said. "I never meant to hurt Sarah, to hurt our family. I just made a mistake." "A mistake?" I said sharply.
No, Marcus.
"This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. You chose to cheat on my daughter. You chose to lie to her. You chose to plan to leave her for another woman. These were choices, not mistakes." Marcus nodded slowly, his voice trembling. "You're right. These were choices, and I have to face the consequences. But I want you to know, I love Sarah. I love our children. I don't want to lose them." "Then you're going to have to prove that," I told him. "You'll have to earn back every bit of trust you've broken. You'll have to show Sarah you're worthy of her love, worthy of our family." "I will," Marcus said firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll prove that I can be the husband and father they deserve." "I hope you mean that, Marcus," I said, "because it starts with telling Sarah the truth. And it continues with proving that you're worthy of her trust." For the first time, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes, real understanding, a sincere desire to change. Maybe, just maybe, this terrible situation could lead to something good. Days later, Sarah returned home. Marcus confessed everything. The affair, the lies, the plan to leave her. Sarah's face went pale. The betrayal cut deep. But she stood strong. She told Marcus she needed time. She took the children and went to stay with her sister. Marcus was left alone, broken, facing the wreckage of his choices. And me? I received a call from the police. They explained that while my actions were motivated by loyalty, what I'd done could still be considered assault. The detective gave me a choice: face criminal charges, or accept community service and counseling. I chose the latter. Through counseling, I learned something powerful. Protecting someone isn't the same as controlling them. Love sometimes means stepping back and letting people make their own decisions. Sarah eventually forgave me. She understood that my actions came from love, even if they were misguided. Marcus also forgave me. He understood that I had acted to protect my family and that I had taken responsibility. Months later, Sarah and Marcus chose to try again. They began marriage counseling. They worked on communication, on trust, on rebuilding what had been broken. It wasn't easy, but slowly it worked. Their children saw parents who were committed again, who chose family over betrayal, who showed that love and honesty could rebuild even the most shattered bonds. Today, 6 months later, our family is stronger than ever. Sarah and Marcus rebuilt their marriage on honesty and communication. The children are happy and secure. And I am grateful. Grateful for the lessons, for the growth, for the proof that even the hardest trials can bring the most beautiful outcomes. Because I learned something important. Love is not about control. It's about support, understanding, respect. Sometimes, the best way to protect the ones we love is to let them face the consequences of their own choices. And sometimes, the most painful lessons teach the most important truths. So, if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to hear more stories about family, love, and the ways we can overcome anything together, subscribe to my channel. Remember this: family is the most important thing we have. It's worth fighting for. It's worth protecting. It's worth growing with. And sometimes, the most difficult experiences lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it's given you hope, inspiration, and the courage to face whatever challenges come your way. Because with love, with understanding, with respect, we can overcome anything together.